We live somewhere in the Mexican plateau. To get here is difficult. Not the village, but this particular moment. It's hard to understand. I will get to that. I have a gift, I think. I walk inside the memory of people and see the small fingerprints of their lives. Let me explain. It's like entering a pale fog. I blink and adjust to their vision, recompose myself in their sight. It is always a strange feeling at first. My eyes sticky from certain emotional debris, like when your son dies or your wife leaves. But I don't get sad at those things anymore. There's a time when I would, probably when my mother was here. Every once in a while, I would walk inside her memory. She was poor and hungry as a child, unhappy as an adult. My feet would callous from walking inside her memory, trying to spot a wild orchid or honeysuckle. There's a time when I thought I would find something nice, but there were no flowers in my mother's memory. I sometimes wonder, were they uprooted from their place? I quit school last fall in order to help my father. We work at one of the many campos, tending the cattle y cosechando maíz. When I am not working, I walk around the village in search of glass bottles. The best spot is at the dirt-laden cancha on Thursday evenings. The men play football badly, and I am their only spectator. I make sure to cheer for both teams because I wouldn't want anyone to feel bad. Although they try their best to imitate Enrique Borja, the games usually end without spectacular headers or definitive goals. Even with these performances, I admire the men for their dedication to the game, laughing and gulping watered down cerveza in between plays. I think they appreciate my presence there, placing their empty botellas in a big brown sack at the end of each friendly. This is their gift for me. When I leave, they always yell out, Chico de la cancha, come back and watch us play again soon. After the game, I usually visit the riverbed before it gets too dark. Not because I would find anything useful like glass botellas or stray coins, but because I could be alone with my thoughts. I like to watch the river and the dimly fading light reflected on the water, but this is only an aside. When it is Friday, I will go to the village's only bar, the one with the faded orange walls and squeaky floors and wobbly stools. I will exchange my weekly collection of bottles for 5 pesos. By the end of the week, I will have enough money for a delicious pink concha. After I've milked the goats, my father lets me leave work early. I run down as fast as I can from the campo to the plaza, my brown sack smacking my back as I descend the rocky mountain. At the plaza square, I spot a group of enforcers loitering by the bar. They all wear different jewelry, uno con la medalla de la Virgen María, some with gold rings, and others with platinum watches. My father tells me that these men are dangerous and to stay away, but I do not feel in any sort of danger. Instead, I'm filled with anger. I am angry when they spit at the old men when they pass them on the street. I am angry when I see them use the ends of their rifles to scratch their buttocks. As I'm making my way through the bar, I turn around. The youngest of them is in the back, watching the others play darts. He's the one I feel bad for. He didn't choose to be a killer. He was abducted from his home at age 12. I know this because I've walked inside his memory. I've seen the straw hut burning and his mother's screams. I've seen his father beg with clasped hands. Siempre necesitan pagar un paso. And the boy was payment. My father was an honest man. For his work, he had two options, 2 libras de frijol or 2 libras de tortilla. We almost always picked tortillas. It kept our bellies full longer. My father would always give me a large portion of his share because he wanted me to grow up big and strong like him. One day, it was incredibly hot. The type of heat where you feel your bones stiffen and your forearms melt into your wrists. My father turned and smiled at me and said, "Me siento como un ladrillo de adobe," as he continued to toil the fields. On this day, there was a dispute. The enforcers came up and asked about the campo. They had a big black truck, and each of them had su propio cuero de chivo. The owner of the farm, an old man, was arguing with them. The old man said they had the wrong people. We were honest. We didn't grow mota. One of the enforcers slapped the owner to the ground, put a rifle to his head. A gunshot. My father grabbed me by the shirt, and we ran down the mountain. They caught up to us by the riverbed. My father stuffed me into a large, hollowed log. I covered my mouth with my hand. I didn't want to watch his body hit the water. I tried to look away, but when they shot him and he went down, for a moment he became adobe, firm, unmovable. The splash sounded across the entire village. This is how my life changed. This is how the river of my village changed. Clear water, turning crimson. I struggled towards the last bits of that summer, sustaining myself on crickets and stolen fruits from nearby farms. I was struck by a peculiar feeling. Nothing would be the same. No more watching the grown men playing football or seeing my father's thin smile. The first glance of the moon after a long day's work. Then there are the smaller things too, like my mother's attempts at teaching me how to ride bridleless. All this was a work of memory, a bit of childhood fantasy. Not long after my 16th birthday, I crossed over the border and started a new life. I planted myself among the palm trees of Santa Monica, believed I could enjoy the sand underneath my feet. But there was this part of me, an interminable darkness, that wouldn't let me transition into my new life. Alone in this dizzying country, I made a little money working as a handyman in a nearby hotel. I changed light bulbs and fixed wobbly chairs. I repaired walls and repainted doors. In between these moments, I captured glimpses of a life not afforded to me. A sea of restless people spending their visits in the small hotel. Artists and political activists, and bankers and lawyers. I slept in a small room where they housed the other immigrants, mostly Africans, Salvadorians, and Chinese. In this tiny room, we tried to make a life. We mourned our loved ones and sang and rejoiced in each other's company. We had nothing except the daily meals of bread and rice and green beans. Sometimes we would vote among ourselves and choose someone to smuggle supplies from the hotel kitchen. Paprika and turmeric and curry powder, little things to make the food edible. We shared a single stove among us, 3 out of 4 burners broken. But this is what made the place so beautiful. We starved like the old saints my mother would tell me about. And in this way, I knew we were really living. You see, when I moved to the US, I realized I no longer had to make a conscious effort to experience a person's memory. My mind became tuned to hear the grumblings of those beside me, their thoughts like muffled voices in my head, kind of like when a chain link fence reflects radio signals. I was invisible to them, to the people here, and maybe it was because of the color of my skin or my poverty, but they couldn't quite see me as real. At first, I pleaded with them and would repeat back their memories. I never received more than a blank stare. Walking away from me, seeing our interaction as a piece of livable dream. But what about me? In between sweeping the floors of the hotel or finding time to sell oranges on the side of the freeway, I had a fumbling desire to let go of this life. I wanted for the people around me to acknowledge their miseries and failures. Although I could walk inside the memories of those around me, I had seen what was inside most people, dried up dreams and desires, and embarrassments and cruelties. There was a numbness. We breathed misery, our lungs were filled with the dust of it. When I moved, an air of nothingness followed me. It happened quickly, but I ended up in a cage with other men like me. Let me explain. I was nervous at first. It all happened so quickly. Landing there with the salvatruches and vatos locos, the same kind of men that killed my father. But in here, we were no different. Nothing that made one bend the arm of the other. We were of equal absence, a coffee stain on a statistic for the department of whatever, somewhere in a high office building. I watched one of the men put a cigarette to his mouth and take a nice big drag. A man smiled, revealing his two front teeth missing. He introduced himself as Toothy to me and invited me to sit and have lunch. I was a little nervous eating with them. We were offered liverwurst sandwiches, and I nibbled on them slowly, trying to get used to the texture of the cold meat. I took a sip of the whiskey from Toothy's mug, another confection smuggled in by the guards. Toothy told me that he knew what was up. He had done this before and had made connections with these men. Toothy began. My brother didn't want me to come to work. Me pagaron el pasaje, but shit, man, that's it. He paused. I remember the first time they brought me over. I was 16, about your age. Toothy nodded at me. I got deported within a week of being in Los Angeles. I was outside a strip club waiting for my hermano when a cop rolled up and was like, "What are you doing here, Bean?" I remember those big aviator sunglasses looking like all kind of potato bug. I laughed. I remember seeing the neon of the strip joint reflected in them. Cheetahs. I don't understand what the fuck he was saying. No inglés, por favor. Well, they sent my ass packing to Tijuana. Toothy laughed. I didn't even get to see tits that day. My own story sounded similar to Toothy's, minus the naked women. I had gone to the beaches with some friends from the hotel. I decided to head back early and wanted to get some rest. They didn't let me walk home. They insisted on giving me a ride or walking with me. It's dangerous out there, they said. But I wanted to walk home, to feel the cold night air on me as I walked through downtown Santa Monica. Before I knew it, a cop grabbed me and asked me what I was doing. I stuttered something that I can't remember. I felt the officer's arm brush up against mine as we walked out of Santa Monica forever. That was that. I looked at the pale moonlight gleam against the wet sidewalk as we made our way to the cruiser. I saw a single leaf fall into a stream of water and get swept into the drain. Years later, I found out that Toothy was murdered in Mexicali. I was sitting in a bar, hearing the thoughts of those around me, and I saw it clearly, as if it was a photograph clip from a newspaper. They slashed his throat and left him by the side of the road. During the time I was stuck in the camp, I started walking in people's memory again. I was bored and wanted to see what was inside the mind of my captors. What surprised me is they looked like me, had my same complexion, but we lived opposite lives. In their country formed by imaginary borders, places, money, there was a disappearance of la tierra, of the same dirt that molded us. Where I was made from adobe, they were made from some strange concoction of hard cement. There was a memory from one of the guards that always made me think of my father and mother. A man gets up from his bed. It creaks as he lifts his weight, and his wife mumbles softly. He gets a couple of beers from the kitchen and walks to the living room and turns on the TV. John Rambo is stabbing a man. He sits on his thrift store recliner, repositions himself to his liking. Thing is, the man says to himself, people that get stabbed don't die quickly. They bleed and pace around. Pebbles crunch softly underneath their boots. The sound echoes inside of them for a long time. Men who travel across borders. Where did my people go? The ones that wandered into the desert, their shadows flickering against the high mountains. Where would I go? What would I do? I sent these people again and again into the shadows, into the shadows, into the shadows. To get to this point is difficult. When I was finally deported, I did go back to my village for a short time. By then, the enforcers that killed my father were long gone, replaced by new ones. People left, changed, and didn't recognize the boy that came to visit them. I'd totally forgotten myself, replacing tidbits of my memory with the images that I've collected, stolen. I decided that it was best for me to leave, but I never felt like I quite moved towards anything. I waited in many places, in many towns across Mexico. I waited. I waited for the world to tell me something. I never stopped waiting.